granted had it been acted upon. And now they've had to file on June 1st of 2012. Same thing here for WRC in Washington, accepted for filing 2 license renewal applications, accepted for filing in tandem. So some of these are going to, this is going to happen, and in some cases it's going to happen whether you like it or not because of some of the problems associated with the Fox case not being decided and the FCC waiting to find out what happens there. So the first step is to know your dates. There are going to be dates for TV, LPTV, Class A TV, AM, FM, translators, and so on. You're going to have to file, you're going to have to prepare notices to the public and be prepared to file your application. So here are the important dates for Minnesota radio stations, AM and FM stations. You will have to, the license expires April 1st of 2013. You'll have to file your renewal application on Monday, December 3rd, 2012, and you'll have to begin making pre-filing announcements on the air on the 1st and 16th of October and November. And then you will have to make post-filing announcements on the 1st and 16th of December 2012, January, and February 2013. TV stations are a year later, but the same dates apply. That's true across the country in all the states. Radio comes up the first year, and then television is the same month the following. And you make the following on-air announcements. Now, unlike other types of applications like assignment applications, these do not have to be published in newspapers, so you don't have to give the competition any revenue here, but you do have to make these announcements on the air. So at least 2 of the required announcements between, they're looking for drive time announcements, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. If the station doesn't operate at that time, at least 2 of the required announcements during the first 2 hours of operation. Silent stations and FM translators must still publish. There are other requirements for them. Timing for post-filing renewal announcements for radio stations, at least 3 are required between in drive time, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. or 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., 1 between 9 a.m. And noon, at least 1 between noon and 4 p.m., 1 7 p.m. to midnight. So they're covering all the time periods. These time periods are found in the FCC's rules on the radio renewal page, and the same thing for television. There are announcements, pre-filing announcements for television. I won't read the times for you, but this will be posted on the website. We will post, by the way, on the Minnesota Broadcasters Association website a PDF of this, and we're going to also make a recording of this webinar available to you. So there's the post-filing renewal announcements. So know your dates, know your announcements, and get them prepared in time. And then remember that it's up to you. In the last round, the FCC would send a postcard reminder out to all broadcast stations. The postcard is gone. Forget it. You're not going to get a notice. Some stations, and I don't find that this is really consistent with everyone, but some stations are getting an email 5 to 6 months before the expiration date to let people know that their renewal, those, forget January, February, this would be June or July for Minnesota, to let people know, but not everybody seems to be getting them. They are sent, to the extent they're sent to the email address in the CDBS system, so you can go to CDBS and make sure that your address is up to date. But remember, failure to receive an FCC reminder does not really, it's not an excuse, doesn't relieve the licensee from complying fully with the renewal procedures at all. So in order to begin your license renewal form, this all has to be done electronically. There are no paper forms. There weren't the last renewal round was the first time that the Commission said everything had to be done electronically. This time, everyone should have some experience with it. You go to the FCC CDBS portal, and you need to know your CDBS account ID, account number, and your password, and then you click Login, and you should log in. You should already, everybody filing renewal should already have an account, shouldn't need to create a new account. You can if necessary. To get there, if you don't already have it bookmarked on your web page, go to fcc.gov/media-bureau, and on the right-hand side, you'll see that there is a box called Quick Links. You can click Filing System and Databases, and that will bring you to the Filing System and Databases. Scroll down to CDBS Electronic Filing System and click CDBS Account Login. Once you do that, you really ought to make a permanent shortcut to the CDBS account login. Here's another URL that will get you directly to the Filing Systems and Databases page on the Media Bureau's website. But if you forget that one or don't write it down, here's just go through these steps from the Media Bureau's website. So you'll get to the renewal forms. The forms you're going to need to do for renewal are the 303S renewal application, the 396 EEO program report. If you need to make a change of address, change your address, and the 159 fee remittance form, which will come up after you file your renewal application. Once you get into the CDBS electronic filing system, there will be a whole list of forms. Now, I've abbreviated it here with these torn sheet to show you just the forms that you'll need to use. There's the 303S, the application for renewal of broadcast station license, your 396 EEO program report, and everyone has to file one of those, whether you actually have to have EEO obligations or not, which of course most of you already know depends upon the size of the staff at the station. The change of address form is down here at the bottom of this list called Additional Non-Form Filings. We'll take you to another menu where that change of address form is there. You don't do this by letter anymore, or everything is done within CDBS. Once you've finished that form, then there's a button to click to get you back to this main page. Remember this, certifications are going to be required. Certifications are at the FCC the equivalent of sworn testimony. So you will have to make a list, a whole bunch of certifications. We'll go through those. And the best way to get prepared for that is to go to the FCC's self-inspection checklists. You can find those on the Enforcement Bureau's website under Broadcasts and Checklists. Here's a link to the, they don't have these up on their new website yet, so it's at transition.fcc.gov, EB/BC-CHK-LSTS. But you can go through there, and it's a good exercise for you to do anyway. Every station should have at least one person who has been through the relevant checklist for their station. And as I said, you will have to make certifications, so be prepared, understand what you're going to have to certify. So I like to boil renewal down to 6 steps to license renewal that you will have to perform. The first is your pre-filing announcements, and we talked about that already. The next is and that's on the 1st and 16th of October and November, 2012, 2013 for TV. Then you file, step 2 is file your renewal form by December 1st, 2012. That's the form 303S and the 396. And the 396 has to be filed first, as you'll learn here in a moment. And then you have to make your online fee remittance. Oops, that's the wrong number. I believe it's $170 per station. I've got that a little later on. Then you file your post-filing announcements. And then you have to remember to put your application and announcements in the public file, the local public file, so folks can find them if they come in to inspect the file. and then once you get your notice of acceptance, post that, and then receive and post your renewal authorization, and you'll be done and ready for another 8 years of successful broadcasting. So to get started with the 303S, you've clicked in the forms list the 303S application for renewal. The first thing that comes up is this. It's the pre-form. You can name it anything that you want. I like to name them with the call letters of the station, 2012 license renewal, or anything else that you would like to. That's the form description that will continue to appear in your CDBS main menu. Remember this, you have to file a separate 303S for each station. So if you have 3 stations in the market, that means you're preparing and filing 3 renewal forms. Click here in question 1, renewal of license. Okay, as you're not, maybe later on you might be amending a pending application, but to get it started, click there, put in your call sign, your facility ID, the FAC ID for the station, and then select the service that's applicable, AM or FM. And then here you have to answer question number 2, which asks if there are any translator stations associated with this broadcasting station's full power station. Click yes or no, and then commercial or non-commercial, and click enter. And that will then pre-fill a series of fields in the 303S, and this is the next field, the next form page that you will see. And these white spaces here in section 1, question 1, will be filled in for you. The legal name of the licensee, this being an existing CDBS account, this will have been filled in already in the CDBS account, as will the contact representative. Now, this is from one that I did, so my contact name is in there and contact information, but that will be pre-filled from the information that's already in your CDBS account. If you're a commercial station, you'd leave question 3 blank. Or you could click here, NA, fee required. The form processes either way. If you're a non-commercial station or for any other reason you're exempt from fees, you would select the appropriate button to click there. The purpose of the application, click Renewal Application. Again, your service, city and state, and whether or not an FM, one or more translator stations is included. In this situation, I click no, and if it's yes, then you have to enter the authorization, or you have to enter the FAC IDs and locations of booster stations, and then click Edit FRN in order to enter your federal registration number and password. So you have to be prepared with the FRN that's associated with that station and the password. Remember, certifications will be required, and here they are. Here's where they start to come. First of all, this is a big, I just wanted to show you the whole sheet. We'll go through these one by one to discuss them, but this will be section 2, the legal portion that you have to fill in, and then you will type or print the name of the person who will sign on behalf, who's actually making the certifications, their title, and the date. The date will obviously have to be before the filing date. You cannot put a date in that is prior to the date or that is after the date that you're filling this in. So you have to put the furthest date forward is the date you're filling it in, or you can leave it blank and keep it as a draft. And then click Save. If you've got the date and everything else filled in, you can click Validate, and it will give you a pretty good evaluation of whether you have everything that you need to have for this page. So let's take them one by one. First question is that you've answered each question in the application, and everything is true. All pertinent standards and criteria have been met, And then you can move on to question number 2, which is your character issues. But basically, here's where you're certifying that everything in the entire application that you're going to file is true. For character issues, that you're certifying that there are no adverse or unresolved character issues with any broadcast application proceeding for this licensee, and that any pending application with character issues there are no pending applications with character issues that have been raised at all. So that's your certification in question number 2. And for this question, the relevant time period is unlimited. So if there are any from any period of time, you have to answer this question affirmatively and then provide an exhibit. But I'm sure that no one will have that problem with that question. With respect to section 2, the next question is question 3. You're certifying that there are no adverse final actions against the licensee. The relevant period here is the past 10 years, and the relevant type of final action we're talking about is either a felony or a mass media related antitrust or unfair competition action against the licensee. Question number 4, that there are no FCC violations during the preceding license term. That you have had no violations. Again, if there have been any violations, then you need to provide an exhibit giving a description of the violation and an explanation for what happened. Only violations that are determined by the commission or a court, however, are the type of violations that you have to report. Preliminary or final determinations are the type of things that you have to report, but mere allegations or the fact that there is a potential violation is not the type of things that needs to be reported. This includes notices of violation, notices of apparent liability, forfeiture orders, and other findings of FCC rule violations, okay? And a notice of violation, even though you may still be contesting it, is a finding of a violation. Does not include violations that you may have found yourself, or if you participate in the alternative broadcast inspection program. It doesn't include those types of violations that you found that may have been found by the inspector and then you corrected. Question number 5 is your alien ownership certification that the station is controlled by U.S. citizens. Question number 6 is your Anti-Drug Abuse Act certification. What that is that federal and state court judges have been given the discretion to deny federal benefits to individuals who've been convicted of the distribution of controlled substances. So if you have, anybody has a drug abuse conviction, then it's important to be sure that you haven't been denied federal benefits for that. And again, that's typically clicked yes, you're certifying that you qualify. Now here's a new one that we've talked about a fair amount. There is an article that I've written, and I think it's been published in the Minnesota Broadcasters newsletter. The new certification is designed to ensure that your advertising contracts do not contain no urban or no Spanish restrictions. So you're certifying that the advertising agreements don't discriminate on the basis of race or ethnicity, and that all agreements held by the licensee contain non-discrimination clauses. How do you assure that these days, particularly these days when a lot of advertising is being placed by agencies, and also when a lot of advertising is placed not even pursuant to a formal agreement, but just by email? Those of you who've read the article know that, excuse me for a minute, we have recommended that you place a no discrimination disclaimer at the bottom of your email messages that goes out with all your email, and that you don't certify that you don't discriminate on the basis of race or ethnicity. You can even add additional categories if you want, other protected classes. And there is some comfort in knowing that the 4A's has adopted a recommendation that all of the advertising agencies adopt a similar certification, a similar requirement. And you can ask your agencies to certify to you, and that's what's being expected of you. So we'll move on. Once you've done all of that, then, as I said earlier, you sign this electronic signature. It's not a written signature. By placing your name in there and hitting the file button, it is considered signed by the person whose name appears in the application. So let's move on to Section 3 of the renewal form. Section 3, 4, and 5 are each devoted to the specific service that you've indicated in the pre-form. So if it's a radio station, you're going to get a Section 3. If it's a television station, you're going to get a Section 4. And if it's an auxiliary or a translator, rather, then you're going to get a Section 5. We'll get into that in a minute. So let's get started with question 1. Question 1 says that you certify that the station's biennial ownership report has been filed with the Commission as required under 733615. Now remember that biennial ownership reports, the date for ownership filing has been changed. It used to be on the anniversary of your renewal application, and that meant that you had to file an ownership report with your renewal application as well. The Commission changed that so that everybody files on the same date. So we're now all on the same timetable. The first one was the 2009 biennial, which was supposed to have been filed in November of 2009. Commission actually didn't get the site ready until middle of 2010, so the filing date for that was in July of 2010. Then the next one came along right after that, because the 2011 biennial was 2 years from 2009, and that was filed in December of 2011. So by question 1, you're certifying your biennial reports have been filed. It's a little confusing as to whether or not you're certifying that both of them have been filed. This is not legal advice. It's an advisory, I guess, to think about. I think that if you filed the 2011, what Sister is referring to is your last one, the 2011 biennial, which was filed in December of 2011. And then you certify that you filed your 396 with the FCC. Now, unless you've done your 396 before you start the 303S, you won't have the number to put in here, and you can't file the 303S without the file number for your 396. So, you know, prepare this and save it in draft, and do your 396 or do your 396 first. Either way, you're going to have to click yes on this in order to successfully file it. If you don't have a 396 on file, you'll have to click on Exhibit 10 and issue an exhibit. And then you also will have to click that you've posted your most recent EEO public file report on the station's website if you maintain a website. Okay, so you must electronically file it first, insert the number in the box, and post it on the station's website, which you've been doing already anyway, so that shouldn't be anything new for anyone. Then question 3 is that you certify that the documentation required to be placed in your local public file has been placed there. And here is a quick list, a quick summary of the things that have to go into the local public file. You should have a checklist of that. It's available in the Commission's rules at 733526. And in the past, I have written some articles that Minnesota has that give you a category-by-category explanation of all of these items, and I'm happy to supply that to anybody who'd like to email me for it at the end of this webinar. Then there's another new question here, question 4, that you have adhered to the minimum operating schedule of the station. Now this can be tricky for daytimers. You should know what your minimum operating schedule is. It's in your license. It can be tricky for daytimers, and I think because of, I had put the rule up here, but because we had a little technical problem, this is actually the prior version of the PowerPoint, and it doesn't have the rule up here. But take a look at the rule. If you've got pre-sunrise or post-sunset or nighttime authority, you don't really have to comply fully with those authorities in order to be able to certify yes for a daytimer. Question 5, discontinued operations. Question asks whether you've been off the air for more than 12 continuous months. If you can't make the certification, then only in a very extraordinarily rare circumstance will you not lose your license. Why? Because Congress added Section 312G to the Communications Act with the idea that it was going to prevent warehousing of station licenses or the broadcasting spectrum. And initially, until the act was amended, initially it meant that if a station or a translator was off the air for 12 continuous months, then the license was automatically revoked, and the Commission did not even have the discretion to reinstate it. It has been given that discretion, but it's extraordinarily rare and very special circumstances that would apply if the Commission would allow itself to reinstate a license. So anyway, you'll all be certifying yes for this, I'm sure. Then they also want to know if the station is silent, if it's currently on the air. Why? Because the Commission won't renew a station license when it's not currently broadcasting. So if it's not on the air, then you'd want to explain that, and but you won't get renewed until it returns to the air. Now, Section 3, Question 7 is your environmental effects question. You're certifying that the facility complies with the maximum permissible radio frequency electromagnetic exposure limits. Previously, in previous iterations of Renewal, you had to do a new environmental study with each renewal application. That is not required this time around if there have been no material facilities changes since the last license grant or renewal. If there have been, then you do have to do the new environmental study. You're certifying the facility will not have a significant environmental impact, that it complies with RF exposure limitations. Again, as I said, if there have been changes, you must successfully complete the RF worksheet and 303S instructions if you can, if you qualify for it. Otherwise, you'll have to do a full RF study. And then you have to certify that you're in compliance with the newspaper or radio cross-ownership rule, and there's specifics for that, and that completes Section 3 for radio. TV is Section 4. It's pretty much most of the same questions, or question 1, 2, and 3 are the same, and then questions 4 through 12 and 16 deal with items specific to television. Questions 4 through 12 deal with children's programming and programming requirements, and question 16 deals with any a waiver if anyone has a waiver to the if anyone has a waiver to the local TV ownership rule or has qualified as being a failing station or marginal operation, and then you have to explain that. So this is mostly, we can talk about this later, deals with the children's core programming and the announcements and the reports, children's television reports, all of which I believe is also helped by Broadcast One Source users, is helped by Broadcast One Source with the public file program. Is that right, Lisa?
It is. Thanks for the free plug.
Sure. It's not free. You guys are paying for the webinar, and we want to thank you for that. So then we can go to question 5, which applies to translators and low power TV stations or FM or TV translators. Again, here you're making certifications that you're in compliance with the ownership restrictions for low power TV. That if necessary, if it applies, that you're in compliance with your EEO program reporting requirements and your environmental reporting. So that's section 5. If you've identified yourself as a translator or low power station in the pre-form. So let's talk a little bit more about the EEO rules, because once you've done that, you've now completed your 303S. Not so tough anymore. It used to be back in the paper form days, they were really long forms. In order to computerize it, the Commission has reduced it basically to a series of the certifications that we just talked about. Now, as we said though, in order to file that 303S, you also have to do your EEO report, and that will be prepared next. We'll talk about that. And here again, we want to thank Broadcast OneSource. We're talking about being a partner with Broadcast OneSource and for its former life as EEO OneSource, because that's how it started, doing the EEO reports. So you have to make sure that your DEO documentation in the local public file. In order to do this correctly, in the public files and is on the website on the renewal filing anniversary date. You have to have a list of all full-time jobs that have been filled during the prior year, a list of the recruitment sources used to fill each vacancies, a description of the supplemental outreach initiatives, and again, Broadcast OneSource helps you to keep track of those very carefully. Yearly total number of interviewees and the total number of interviewees referred by each recruitment source, and a summary description of the supplemental outreach initiatives. And Broadcast OneSource helps you to do all of that. So all licensees have to file an FCC Form 396 with your license renewal application. Must be filed electronically first, and then insert the number in the box that I showed you a little bit earlier. The reports cover the two, so you'll have two public file reports that have to be attached to the 396 covering the 2-year period preceding the filing of the renewal application. And they actually have to be converted to PDF and filed with the application. Recently acquired stations, so how far back do you have to go? You're only expected to cover the period since your acquisition. Now, you're not responsible for what the prior licensee did. If it was in the middle of a period, then essentially you have to create a new public file report or new report, and you can prorate the periodic efforts, both in terms of the quantity and the period of time. The report also asks you whether complaints have been filed against the station for unlawful discrimination anytime during the most recent license term. So you're going back 8 years for this. And then if there have been any complaints filed, information regarding how they were disposed of or what their status is, but you don't have to report them if they were resolved on the merits and favorable to the broadcaster. So these are only complaints that have not been resolved or that have been disposed of in a way that was not fully favorable to the broadcaster. And then you pay your filing fee. And as I said earlier, the filing fee per station this round is actually $170 per station. You pay the fee online by credit card, or you can print out the Form 159 and send it with a check to the Mellon Bank in 14 days. Now, remember, actually, I don't think it's a Mellon Bank anymore. This may be a slide from the last one, but in any event, it'll give you the directions on where to send a check. The best, easiest, and most successful way of making sure that the payment gets in there is to pay by credit card. What I didn't say is that after you fill in your 396, you file that, you push the same filing procedure where you put in the name of the person certifying it, put in the FRN number, and then you can save it, validate it, go back to the main page and file it. There's no fee for filing that, but there is a $170 fee per station. In any event, whether you pay by credit card or by mail, it has to go to the Mellon Bank within 14 days. Or the bank that is now processing them. So how do we make sure, now that's the process. How do we make sure we get a renewal filed without any problems? Changes in the law, let's review that. It goes back to the 1996 Telecom Act. Those of you, some veteran broadcasters, remember that there was a time when people could actually file a competing application against your renewal and claim that they would be a better broadcaster based upon their promises versus your performance. That was removed by the 96 Telecommunications Act. The licensee runs on your record. So if you've got a good record as a broadcaster, you will be renewed. We'll talk about how the commission can determine that, whether under their criteria you've got a good record. The better the record, the greater the likelihood of renewal. So under the 96 Telecom Act procedure, it's really a two-step process. The first step, before anybody else can even be considered, is whether or not you should be renewed. If you should be renewed, then that's the end of the process. If not, then other people can apply for the station. And the statutory standard for determining a renewal is whether you serve the public interest, convenience, and necessity. There's been no serious violations of the Communications Act, no other violations that the Commission should take cognizance of that might constitute a pattern of abuse by the licensee. If it can't find that, then it's very possible that you could get a short-term renewal or be designated for hearing. The standard for review for the public interest, convenience, and necessity, the criteria considered in review a petition to deny filed is we don't really know because there haven't been any cases that we know of that have actually gone to hearing over that standard. But what do you need for renewal expectancy? Well, the Commission has given us some guidance on this. First of all, they will look to how well you have ascertained the needs of your community. You may recall that there was a time, some veteran broadcasters again may recall that there was a time when you had to engage in a very elaborate formal ascertainment procedure to determine what the needs of your community are. That's no longer required. That was done away with, but only the formal requirement was done away with. You're still considered, the Commission still expects every broadcaster to actually ascertain what the needs of their community are and to develop programming that's responsive to it. They're just not telling you how or who the people you have to interview are. So remember that and all good broadcasters are involved in their community, so ascertaining what the needs and concerns of your community are would not be a problem. And developing responsive programming for it. And I've written some articles on that as well that are available through the Minnesota Broadcasters and on some websites that I'll show you later on. Your reputation in the community and your pattern of obeying FCC rule compliance, and any special efforts that you've made in the community to be involved or to serve the community, all of those will go into the Commission's consideration of whether a renewal expectancy is deserved by the licensee. Remember, petitions to deny can be filed by parties. I showed you some examples of that earlier in the webinar. They can be filed up to 1 month before the license expires. Once that 1 month period, once we're into that 1 month period, you can't formally file a petition to deny. 90 days after acceptance of a late filed renewal. So if you don't get your renewal filed on time, then they will accept petitions to deny until 90 days after it's actually filed. The petitioner must serve the licensee applicant, and if they're filed late, they don't meet these other filing deadlines, the Commission still has the discretion to consider the petition an informal objection and to consider the allegations made in it. So in order to file a petition to deny, the petitioner must have standing. That means that they have to allege their status as either being a regular listener, so they're in the community listening to the station, or they are someone who can establish that they are directly harmed in some way by the station or the licensee in a way that relates to their broadcast service. They also have to make a statement that the facts are verified as true, and they do that either with an affidavit or a declaration under penalty of perjury. If you get one of these, best advice I can give you is call your lawyer, because you're going to need to do it to respond to this in a proper way. So let's talk about the renewal expectancy and the various things that you are supposed to do. Again, you should be out there in the community. Someone should be ascertaining the needs of the community, determining what they are. It's not all that tough to do. The standard is really not that elaborate any longer, but you should be doing that, and in some way there should be a record kept of the rule of what you have determined are the needs of the community that you've ascertained. Now that's normally done in your issues and programs lists, and we'll get to that in a minute. But that, again, you've certified that you've placed everything in a local public file that is supposed to be in there, and that would include your issues and programs lists, and that they were placed there on time. If not, then you need to provide an explanation for that. And that you have prepared or programmed and broadcast responsive programming to the needs that you ascertained. Now, there is a misunderstanding among some broadcasters that the responsive programming has to have been local or locally produced or produced by the broadcaster. Not true. It can be, as long as it is responsive to the issue or the need that you have determined to be in the community, that is good responsive programming, you know, as long as it is responsive and meets the needs of the issue that you determine. Your reputation in the community also is important, and to the extent that a petition to deny can cite specific facts under penalty of perjury that seriously call a licensee's reputation into doubt, then that could be the basis of a petition to deny, as well as any pattern of non-compliance with FCC rules. And most of you are familiar with most of the Commission's rules, and also that you have reached out to the community and been a part of it. So good broadcasters, we know, are always doing that, participating in community organizations and being responsive to community needs. So that is another factor that can be considered in a licensee's renewal expectation. Here's some old ones that I had in a slide from our last license renewal webinar, but where the Commission has found that some people, some licensees, have a history of willfully and repeatedly violating Commission's rules. In this case, it was indecency, but they have found it for other things such as public file, lights on towers, transmitter maintenance, other things that Commission inspectors have found, and there have been notices of violation and forfeitures made for repeated violations, which could operate against a broadcaster's expectation of renewal expectancy. So it's important to keep your eye on rule compliance. So issue ascertainment is insurance. I'm sure most of you are doing that. Make sure your EEO files are prepared and filed properly. Let's see, we went through this. This is a duplicate of those slides that I took out, at least in the next version of this PowerPoint, so we'll go through these real quick. But it's a good reminder just to go over it again, and a good reminder that, and I really have found this to be true, folks, for those of you who have been subjected to an EEO audit, and there's an audit going on right now, as a matter of fact. Broadcast One Source subscribers who fully participate and use the service properly, getting through those audits is pretty much a breeze. The next thing is the environmental and historic environmental certification that you have to make. Now, the FCC has broad environmental responsibilities, and it has a variety of acts that it has to comply with, but most of those deal with new facilities. What the Commission is concerned with here is your RF. So the fact that you have complied when you built the tower or built the station, strobe lighting, wilderness and wildlife, endangered species, historic places, that's not what we're concerned with this time around. Indian religious site, floodplain, so on. What we're concerned about here is your RF radiation exposure. And if yes to any question, then the environmental, if yes to if you don't have a radiation certification from the last renewal, and there have been some changes, then you'll have to do the RF checklist again. So a simple explanation. The RF checklist can be used if you're the only user on a tower, if you're one of several FM or FM translators on a single tower more than 315 feet, meters rather from any other tower, non-excluded RF radiation source, multiple tower array, AM station if access is restricted to preclude access and warning signs. If you don't qualify under these qualifications, I'm not going to read them all, it's there in the 303S, then you have to do a full-blown environmental study, but otherwise you and your engineer can do the worksheet. The RF radiation compliance is OET Bulletin 65. Your engineer should be very familiar with that and make sure that you are familiar with it. The public inspection file. Commission has fined people for, and if you watch the notices that are coming out, they're continuing to find public file violations, and that can affect your renewal expectancy. So make sure you've got all the things that are necessary to be in there. Remember this too, the public has a right of access during regular business hours. Only in the last month there have been some notices of people who have said where members of the public went to the main studio and could not access the local public file, or people were told, come back when the manager's here, I don't know where it is. Remember, they're entitled to the local public file. No appointment is necessary. They don't have to have identification other than their name and address, and you can't ask them what organization they're with. That is irrelevant to their access right to the local public file. All station employees should know the location of the public file. If your receptionist is out to lunch and someone walks in and asks to see the public file, whomever is covering or whoever is at the station ought to know where it is and the procedures for making it available. I recommend that you put a placard or notice near the receptionist stating stating the location of the local public file, and make sure that all employees and staff understand those procedures. Must be at the station's main studio and provide copies of material. If they want copies, you have to provide copies, but you are entitled to make a reasonable charge for them. We're awaiting the online rule, whether you have to public to television stations in the major markets affiliated with a major network, and then later everybody, but all television stations will have to put their public inspection files online, and under what circumstances. There was a notice today that Lisa picked up that television station groups have filed a request, an appeal at OMB. We know that the NAB has filed an appeal with the Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C., so we're waiting to see what happens with the requirement to post your public inspection file and your political file online. Children's programming reports for television stations. I'll go through that really quick. It's best, let's just go through these slides. It's best to go through these again next year when you're preparing the TV applications. We're talking about your core programming requirements, programming specifically designed to serve the educational and informational needs of children, your quarterly FCC 398 reports, and your electronic, your requirement to post them. Core programming, the significant program purpose test is any television programming that furthers the educational and informational needs of children 16 years of age or under in any respect. The programming, children's programming has 2 phases, 3 hours of core programming per week. You have to ID it, put it in your quarterly 398 report. Programming originally produced, core programming has to be programming originally produced and broadcast for children 12 years of age or under, 12 minutes on weekdays. I'm sorry, this is the commercial limits test, 12 minutes on the weekdays, 10.5 minutes on weekends, PSAs, and educational and informational material not counted. So the program must be, children's programming report must be maintained separately in the public file in a separate folder, publicize its existence in a location in an appropriate manner. You also report your non-broadcast efforts, a summary of licensee programming response and support for other stations' programming directed to educational and informational needs of children on your FCC 398, and that's children's programming. Now, the other thing I wanted to cover in this is duopoly and LMA considerations, and this will be our last topic. Don't head for the beach. If you are the licensee of an LMA station, or if you're LMAing a station that is licensed to another party, the licensee, it's not a day off. It's not a license to head for the beach or to the mountain cabin, for that matter. It's still the licensee's inalienable responsibility to provide issue-responsive programming on the station. And because it's done on one station and not done on the LMA station, doesn't count. It has to be on each station. Now, the programmer can support and help the licensee with issue-responsive programming, but it's still the licensee's responsibility to make sure that it is done. The FCC, as far as they're concerned, there's no difference between a brokered and a non-brokered station. The brokered station has the same responsibility as a non-brokered station. and it is the brokerage stations must still prepare and place in their local public inspection file issues and programs lists. Again, the programmer can help and assist the licensee in doing this, but it is the licensee's responsibility. That cannot be delegated. Your LMA agreements, if they get reviewed by the Commission to determine whether there's been an unauthorized transfer of control, must contain provisions that specify that the licensee has responsibility for the station, and the duration of the LMA agreement must be specified, and what provisions govern its termination. How is the time broker paying the licensee for the station or its time? And these requirements also apply to shared service agreements for television stations. The amount of time that's brokered. Has the LMA, does it cover all of the time, part of the time? We always recommend, and the Commission looks to this to determine the validity of an LMA and the licensee's responsibility. Has the licensee retained some of the time to program its own programs on the radio station? And that's an important provision to leave in or to make sure is in your agreement. And who's responsible for preparing all the records? Again, that's the licensee's responsibility. It can be done with the assistance of the programmer, but it's still the licensee's responsibility, and they must also have the unfettered right to preempt programs. Now, that's the FCC responsibility right we're talking about. There can be economic consequences for preempting a program, but or if it were to happen all the time, it could lead to a termination of the agreement. But nevertheless, it is still the licensee's responsibility to determine what should be broadcast, and therefore they have to have the right to preempt programs. And the licensee must maintain control of the personnel, the minimum personnel required by the Commission to staff the station. And under the station's, the FCC main studio staffing rule, that would be one full-time person, two full-time employees, one of whom must be supervisory, but the second person can work for other people, including the programmer. So as a practical matter, it's 1.5 full-time people. Again, must have the right to reject any programming and must make sure that there is time for issue-responsive programming, and the licensee must pay the licensee expenses. The first thing the Commission will do when it's investigating to determine whether there's been an unauthorized transfer of control is ask for records of how the station expenses are paid. So last word on LMAs, remember this: an allegation of an unauthorized transfer of control can hold up a license renewal application for years until it is dealt with and resolved by the Commission. So remember, you can get more information from us on the web at www.wcsr.com. Go to wcsr.com/telecom, and then you will be able to get to our web page, where there's a good deal of information, and there are our memos for broadcasters. You can download our EEO manual, or better yet, you can, let's keep going here, better yet, you can sign up with Broadcast One Source and let them help you through this. Now, you can ask me for additional, you can reach me with additional questions. My direct dial is 202-857-4441. You can email me at gscall@wcsr.com, or follow my Twitter feed at Comlaw, COMMLAW on Twitter, and that will take you also to articles that I've written, as well as the you can get articles from the Minnesota Broadcasters Association, or sometimes they're published in Radio Business Report or All Access. And I did have another slide. I had added another slide for Broadcast OneSource, but I don't think it's in here because, Lisa, we're using your previous version of the PowerPoint. So let me ask you to say a few words about Broadcast OneSource and what it can do for broadcasters as well.
Well, sure. We're happy to do that. Thanks for having us today. Broadcast OneSource is a web-based portal that helps you digitize all of your FCC compliance. The management of your EEO report and the maintenance of your public file are core functions in your role as licensees. And Broadcast OneSource, we take that just as seriously as you do, but we believe that technology makes the process easier. Our system's user-friendly. It's designed for the very least technically savvy among us. So let us show you how to systemize your compliance safely and reliably. You can check us out online at broadcastonesource.com.
Okay. So have we got any questions? We finished in about an hour. We've got another half hour that we reserve time for questions if anyone would like to ask.
You can type your questions into your control panel right here at the bottom, and they'll show to us, and then we can answer those for you if you have them. I know it's a lot of information. It might be easier to email them, but we're certainly happy to help at this point if you'd like to ask a question.
All right. Well, it looks like we don't have any. So either we've done a good job, we have put you to sleep, or you already knew how to do this. So thank you for joining us. We hope that this has been helpful, and please let us know how we can continue to be of assistance to you. Thanks a lot.